a £1 trillion safety net to protect the banks from collapsing. And so, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, Lehman Brothers, the banks who tanked the global economy were saved by taxpayer money, whilst the working class saw the greatest cuts they'd seen in generations via austerity. And people noticed this pretty quickly. People were starting to wake up to the fact that unregulated capitalism as it currently existed is fucked. Public rage was brewing, and the ruling class was starting to get scared that real change might occur that would upset the current order in which they benefited from. And so in 2011, we start to see the people organizing, and we see Occupy Wall Street.
Occupy Wall Street, all day, all week.
Suddenly, people aren't just pissed off and protesting, they're now naming names. The 1% becomes a mainstream concept.
1 in 7 children in the United States suffer from hunger. At the same time, we're giving billions and almost $1 trillion to Wall Street just for bailouts. We need an economy for the people and by the people, not by the rich and for the rich.
People are noticing that the politicians that they had to choose between were being funded by the same banks that just broke the economy. All the while, this left-wing populist movement was starting to grow, and they were demanding things like higher taxes, stronger labor rights, and universal healthcare. And so the ruling class realized that they needed a distraction.
Welcome to the Glenn Beck program. Tonight, the truth about social justice and distorting its meaning. No. We're going to correct its meaning.
We have like, God, right-wingers have used so many crackheads to just like actively belittle and dismantle any kind of like left-wing populism. And liberals have so gladly allowed that to happen. Liberals have also simultaneously been like, yeah, no, that's great. Like they've complained about Glenn Beck. They've complained about him, right? But they also totally allowed right-wingers, as they did consistently, and as they did with the Black Lives Matter movement as well, liberals in positions of power have always taken note from the right on how to undermine leftist movements. Historically, this is just how they've always operated. This is why there's the famous adage of, cut a liberal and a fascist bleeds, because they find themselves aligned with right-wingers and fascists time and time again when push comes to shove, when there's economic volatility, economic instability, and they are worried about capitalism becoming undone. Same shit happened with Bernie Sanders, where you saw liberals lose their minds at the prospect of a Bernie-style figure.
In the mid-2010s, something weird started to happen to the left. Social justice movements started to explode. We'd see Me Too, Black Lives Matter, increasing LGBTQ activism. And this movement starts to grow, and you see it in things like university and corporate HR departments, where they would start to implement diversity and inclusion initiatives. And some of this was very well intended, and some of it was purely performative.
Remember summer 2020? When our social media was filled with those little black boxes? Now this was irritating, as I could tell that these were people that had no intent on creating.
This is yet another instance I recall when Radlibs yelled at me because I was like, why are you posting a black box? It is stupid. Stop posting black boxes. You are actually not helping, but instead harming activists that are using the Black Lives Matter hashtag to get information across to as many people as possible. And people yelled at me because I made them feel bad, because they wanted to feel like they were helping. They wanted to feel like they were doing performative help, slacktivism. How many times does this have to happen for people to finally come to that conclusion? The worst part about it is that it's not like when people realize that they might have been in the wrong, that they go back and go, hey, the guy who told me I was in the wrong initially that I yelled at, he might have been in the right. I've learned from my mistakes. I'm going to be a little bit more open-minded to what he's saying. Nope. They just carry on that resentment. They carry that resentment permanently, and they just move on Yeah, similar thing happened with the AI Gaza pig. Is that Will's hat? No, we have the same hat, chatter. It's funny though. No.
Justice or true change, but they only wanted to appease their conscience.
From here, the liberal media starts to jump on board. You start seeing men's razor blades telling you that young boys having a little wrestle is toxic masculinity.
Making the same old excuses.
Boys will be boys. Boys will be boys.
Ice cream tubs were talking to you about racism. Nike run Black Lives Matter adverts whilst also simultaneously paying children to work in sweatshops. An era of what would be dubbed corporate woke washing started to gain a lot of momentum and kind of defang the economic left-wing movement of Occupy Wall Street. After George Floyd was murdered, big corporations would come out making these statements about racism, donating to charities, etc. But, you know, they were very quiet in perhaps supporting any economic policies like higher minimum wage, stronger unions, enhancing social welfare programs, things that might help the living conditions of people like George Floyd. Instead, these big businesses started to focus on pushing identity politics as the main leftist discourse. And to like average people, you could see it. You could see there was a hypocrisy. If you're not going to improve the living conditions that create many of these social problems, then it kind of came across as empty and hollow, performative, so to speak. And so it created a reactionary right-wing movement.
I mean, you have talked about this woke mind virus.
Yes.
You should explain why you don't think it's hyperbole to say things like it's pushing civilization towards suicide.
2016 onwards, YouTube explodes with SJW cringe compilations. And whilst it seemed quite organic, various think tanks funded by billionaires were actually funding these anti-woke content creators, politicians, and policies. Things like the American Principles Project, the Clement Institute, the Heritage Foundation, the Stanford Review, Rupert Murdoch, who owns Fox News, The Sun, The Times, New York Post. All of these people would weaponize wokeness as the biggest existential threat to society.
David, am I overstating the fact that we're beginning to see the end of woke, the militarization of the Me Too movement and cancel culture?
The oil billionaires Dan and Faris Wilks, they would pump big money into...
Great video, dude. I mean, he is so dialed in. I've talked about all this stuff extensively, but goddamn, Jimmy the Giant really cooked on this one.
To things like PragerU and Daily Wire, who would push people like Ben Shapiro, Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson, Jordan Peterson, etc. Eventually manifesting itself in Peter Thiel, the tech billionaire, being the financial backing force of J.D. Vance, who would of course become vice president.